is going on, Secondhand Talent family? It is your boy Steiner here, as always, with another episode of Secondhand Talent. Want to give some thanks first to our friends at Tenacious Toys for supplying the desk candy, our friend Luke Chu making this cool piece here, our friend Mark Spusta, whose shirts we were on the show, Todd Cox for making me this chain, and Matt Crozier for making this awesome hat, and Mife Designs for making these secondhand talent pins, which you can get at secondhandtalent.com. But enough about that. We have with us a very important person today, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Sam Baker, aka Glitch Gatsby. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me on the show.
For the folks who are listening and not watching on YouTube, folks, you should be watching on YouTube because he's got a great mug, but also I got something to say. Building off a lifelog of jazz and blues, Glitch Gatsby brings together an anachronistic fusion of brass and bass with live saxophone and visuals. Now, 10 years into performing, he's held residencies with Detroit's esteemed Theater Bazaar in Ybor City, Tampa's biannual Steampunk Ball, as well as various spots at Electric Forest Music Festival, including the Speakeasy and the Silent Disco. Finally breaking out solo, he's now founded the entertainment company Honest Age Productions LLC. Their debut project, the Eagle's Nest Performance Stage and Forest Art Walk at Harvest Fest, awesome festival, Emergent Fest in the greater Chicago area, is a brand new installation that they were glad to include recently. Folks, let's welcome Sam Baker, aka Glitch Gatsby, to the show. Sam, what are the stuttering? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on the show. How's it going?
It's going great, man. I'm so glad you're on the show. It's so wonderful to bring people in from the local greater Chicagoland area where I am allegedly located. And it's really nice to have you on the show. You do a bunch of great things. And we'll get
Thanks.
to we'll get to all of those. But first and foremost, when you first heard the term secondhand talent, when I reached out to you to be on the show and said, "Hey, come be on my podcast, Secondhand Talent," what was your reaction to the phrase initially? Just knee-jerk reaction.
Secondhand talent.
Yeah. What was the knee-jerk? What
I
did you think
mean,
it could possibly be? Or what did the phrase
to be
conjure up?
honest, first knee-jerk reaction, actually my brain associated it with Second City because it's Chicago and
Oh
yeah,
my.
actually, yeah, cause Second
Oh
City, yeah,
my.
because it's Chicago based and yeah, so
So kind of
initial
like
knee-jerk reaction was cross association between the two.
You know, one of the things I love the most about this show is that we're in season 4 now, and sometimes it gets harder and harder to ask this question, but regardless, every time every answer I get is unique. I've never gotten the same answer twice. And I love hearing the genuine knee-jerk reactions like that. You know, it's so much fun for me I think about Justin Hampton's interview and how it's a much longer story. Check out the interview, season 1. Um,
Yeah, I was
he
just gonna
compare
ask, what's one of the most interesting ones you've gotten as an answer?
well, Justin Hampton, legendary rock poster artist, has also done comic books, Magic the Gathering, so much more.
Oh,
He
nice.
said it was kind of like finding a painting at a Goodwill store, but a painting that another artist had bought and painted over, and then it was back at Goodwill. So it was like it was secondhand and then became secondhand again. But it was like this diamond in the rough discovery that like, holy shit, it's this completely unique piece of art in the bargain basket bin at Goodwill. That was one of my one of my favorites from season 1. Um,
It's pretty great.
yeah, that one stands out for sure. We're at by the end of this season, incredibly, we'll be about 75 episodes in, and there have been so many. Isn't that crazy? 75 episodes, 75 different answers. And I get
Yeah,
different answers when I ask people on the street too, when I'm just talking about the show. It really makes me very grateful for all the folks who tune in, and even more grateful for all the folks like yourself who choose to take time out of their busy days to be on the show.
Yeah, well, again, like I said, glad to be here. And thanks for having me, and thanks for doing the show, sharing local Chicago artists and people in production and all different fronts of it, and you know, kind of shining a light all around.
And speaking of which, it's few and far between, I would say, in the allegedly 75 episodes we'll have at the end of the season. But we do often have bands on the show or performers in some aspect. And I do get asked occasionally, why? Kind of seems to be the antithesis of the show. And the point of it is to highlight the fact that there are so many bands and solo artists, for that matter, who really have all of their secondhand talent built in. They do everything themselves from promoting to booking to developing merch to, developing their website to, I mean, you name it, whatever job it is, unless, the house person, they have a house audio person, for example, and you don't need to hire one, you know, as a solo performer, there's a lot on your shoulders without, representation or management or any of the accoutrement that, other larger, folks have access to. So, that's the reason why we have performers on our show. Matt Rennick from Sacred Hollow, Joe Ray from Munyon, Danny Biggins from Zombie Manana, and now you, Glitch Gatsby. It's really important that. Oh, and I would be remiss to mention the incredible Joe Marcinek. It's great to have folks like you on the show because we talk so much about the hard work that goes into producing live music. And then let's compound that with actually producing the entertainment and performing it yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a lot even just doing the performance side without doing anything else balanced in there because you're whether it's DJing or just music production, or shouldn't say just, but DJing or music production or an instrument in a band or solo. That's a lot of hours you have to put in just on that one craft and getting it so it sounds the way you're happy with it, getting it where if you have fans that are trying to, whether it's commercially driven or creatively driven or what have you,
Mm.
getting it where the fans are enjoying it too, and it's up to general standards of whatever you're trying to go for with it. But then you throw in, and nowadays you kind of have to do a lot more of this regardless, is you have to throw in the social media side and self promotion and promotion of the shows you're a part of and other people's things. And then, continuing to stay up on all that. And then doing the business side and interacting with agents or venues. And really, that's honestly kind of what you have to do just if you're just an artist or a band. If you're a band, you can kind of split up those responsibilities because you have multiple people. But if you're a DJ or a solo artist, then you're either hiring out a manager or really doing it yourself because even if you can get picked up, that doesn't mean that you're really going to get what you want out of that kind of a relationship. And then if you're doing the event side of it, that's where you start really kind of getting heavy with it. And, you can do it up to a certain scale on your own, so to speak. But like with Harvest Fest, which you mentioned, I was the one who is like the lead in charge of the stage that we were doing and the forest because there are three stages. There's the main one, which was the legacy band and other main headliners, and Joe Marcinek, who you mentioned, was on that stage, like jam and funk bands largely. Oh yeah, they crushed it.
Shout out Joe,
And
friend of the show. Check it out, season 3, episode 2.
oh yeah, I definitely will. I actually can't remember if he's from Valpo or Chesterton or where, but I know he's also from Northwest Indiana, which is
Yep.
where I mostly grew up too,
Mhm.
in Valpo. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
remember
And
him. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's there are so many things to touch on, what you just had to say. And I can relate to it from, the solo artist aspect as a comedian from my earlier years, and now as, a podcast host and doing other things by myself, pretty much, um, in a lot of other aspects, like getting myself to say less, things like that. And so it's a full-time job in and of itself. But there are things that I do that are completely redefining my own definition. I often say the most we can do is the most we can do. And what I've been finding, especially over, the last few months at the time of this taping and ramping up production for season 4, is that most is something that just will continue to balloon if you don't contain it. And I guess before we get into the history of it all, I'm curious to know what are some of your management or coping strategies for, you know, for being a solo performer who does, and then so much, all of thankfully, thank God for Steiner who does all of our social media because I can't even fathom that. And I mean, I run the YouTube channel and do everything else, but thank God for her for taking care of that because Lord Almighty. And the merch that we produced was relatively easy. It was with friends, and I'm grateful for them. Shout out Mike, shout out Bayleaf Studios. And go get yours at secondhandtalent.com. Double plug, double plug. Wow, I rarely do that. But it's so difficult, I'm finding, as this expands, to continue to, or we're finding rather, I should say, that it's between the two of us even so difficult to contain and what's going on and meet the learning curve that's becoming steeper and steeper. And yeah, and like I mentioned, I'm just curious to know, like, what are some of your, like, over 10 years into the business, what are some of the ways you've learned to manage some of that stress and cope around it and compartmentalize it.
Well, I mean, as I was actually about to say, even though I was in charge of the stage in the woods, it was really a giant group effort, and that's where it falls away. Just like you were saying with your team with Secondhand Talent, it's really not just you, it's the team you have taking on these roles and specializing, taking on these roles and specializing, so that you're freed up to focus on what you need to, whether it is oversight at certain levels or you just drilling into something that you need to focus on alongside everyone else doing their thing. And then, as everyone does their thing, it really comes together instead of you having to jump around and switch your brain 200 times in a day's work. You can kind of keep it on 5 or 10 things and actually make some good progress and not be totally drained at the end of it. Have energy to make it through whatever you're working on, enjoy it while you're doing it, and not feel totally depleted. And when you're done, actually be in as healthy a place as possible. And that's something that you kind of learn with time. Like after this last Harvest Fest, I ran my batteries down to 0 and then some. And, it's a learning experience. I had a lot of people helping at so many different levels, and I could have reached out to some more people who would have leapt at helping and even delegated a lot more from my own roles I was taking on. But, you know, it's that balance of people want to help, but you don't want to lean on people too much, especially when it's volunteers versus paid staff. And even when it's paid staff, there's certain things where it's like, I should really do this myself. Like, for whatever reason, I don't react that much to poison ivy. So when it came to laying the lights along the trail in the woods, I just didn't even ask anyone to help. I was just like, all right, this may take forever because it's just me doing this whole thing on both ends. But if I don't get poison ivy going through this and everyone else does, I should be the one doing it. So,
I mean,
at the
that's
end
the
of it,
quintessent. I don't know, finish what you were saying. Sorry, at the end of the day.
I was just gonna say, yeah, at the end of it, I was pretty drained, and now I'm learning to marshal my energy better.
So from what I gather from what you just said, which was quite insightful, I think it's this really calculated combination of patience, compartmentalization, scheduling according to what will make you happy. So there's obviously going to be some grunt work in there, but make sure to sprinkle in things that you enjoy, especially either to start you out or in the middle or to end it off so you feel good when you wrap up. And being able to carry that positive mentality through the end of the day until tomorrow when you start that cycle again.
Well, yeah, definitely, and I'm glad you said that because I was talking about specializing, but a certain amount of job rotation for yourself and everyone on your team as much as you can really helps. Like I was doing that, but then other times I was, you know, doing my own art install to kind of add to the mix alongside my co-producer Steve Garcia, Crush Signal Glass, and he's the producer who brought me in on this. He produced the stage last year, and or not last year, 2 years ago, and yeah, he was kind of burnt out himself from how hard he pushed himself to make it all happen, and he wanted to do it again this last year, but he just didn't have the energy. He was working full time kitchen, so he didn't have as much time on his hands to do it. And he tapped me in, and I took his place, the head producer for that stage. Brought him in again as a co-producer. Also brought in Corey Person of Get Down Chicago, now DJing under PRS1, and they helped me along with a lot of other people with getting that area and the woods and the stage together. We built and did the stage ourselves alongside
Oh yeah.
Steve Geyer and God, why am I
You
PJ?
know
God,
what?
why am I?
Let's put a pin in that and think on it and put all those people's links in the or in the description of this episode. People go follow them and check them out. Shout out to them and leave a comment and say thanks to Steiner for steering the ship on this program. It's so important not just to be able, you know, and I talked about this. It's so interesting at the time of this taping. I talked about this in a very recently recorded interview about being that person who's on call and, the value of being that person. But that is only valuable inherently if it's in conjunction with knowing other people who you trust to operate alongside you. And what I heard from you is just a perfect example and encapsulation of what my previous guest Tim Ding has had to say. It's about not just being able to be the guy that gets referred by other people, but knowing who to bring on board. Shout out again to Marshall Towski and Mike Silberman for one of my most recent projects. I mean, and shout out Bodachita, of course. Talk about premiere video, premiere sound. I mean, I would respectively, I would. I mean, anybody asks me to do sound in this area or film, it's those guys, and I trust them to bring in the most quality people in every other aspect that I can't think of. Um, it's so wonderful to hear that you were able to take on that responsibility, bring on the right team, the right people, and surround yourself with the right energy and the right manpower to make it happen. I think it was a wise move bringing him in a lesser capacity role. to have that morale and to have that know-how and that understanding. I think that that speaks volumes to your capacity and understanding the importance of what it takes to run an event successfully or a stage or whatever the case may be. That understanding that the knowledge didn't start with us, being able to
Well,
practicalize that, is something that this show strives for.
I mean, with Steve, it was more me doing the work in the first part, just the pre-production. But then when we got to it, actually having to do the stage and on-site stuff, and I actually ended up staying with him and his girlfriend Judy, and living in on the futon in his glass blowing studio on their property. But yeah, it was him taking over in parts more than me, where I was needing like time to rest and recoup, and then kind of us like tag teaming back and forth. And there were times where yeah, it was him kind of rallying us all and getting us into gear, and then there were times it was me. So it was really more
Takes
just
a
kind of on
team.
the front end. And then, again, it's when you have the right team, people can
Yeah,
tag in and out when they need to. It's a lot
exactly.
healthier all around. Because if
And
you have it where one person can't tag out, which I did make it that way for myself, unfortunately, at a few points, which again is a mistake I'm trying to get better about. But when you have it set up right, you yourself or people on the team all around can step out when and if they need to and how they need to, and the team can still function. Things can get done, and that way, everyone on the team, is able to function both with what you're doing as a project and just in life. Because otherwise, nothing is really working or getting done. Not just on the project, but just again the health part, which is far more important than any event or project.
absolutely. And as I always say, not only is there no I in team, I've never met anybody named I to this day. So I see we have a new friend joining us. What's our friend's name?
This is my buddy Jack. He's my bandmate and the manager for Glitch Gatsby.
That's so
Yeah, he
interesting.
yeah,
The secondhand dog's name is Jill. We got Jack and Jill
there you
going on
go.
over
Oh
here. Yeah,
shit,
how
there
about
you
that?
go.
Some
Yep,
nursery rhyme up in this bitch.
taking it back.
Get, speaking of taking it back, let's take it back to how you got into performing music. Because I feel like, I mean, I'm speaking as a comedian where solo performing is kind of what we do, except when we're in, improv groups, coming up. But um, where did you come into music? What was your taste in music that kind of got you into, hey, I want to make this that led to being Glitch Gatsby where you're at today?
Well, I played piano as a kid from like 7 to 13, and then stopped for a couple years because I kind of got tired of doing it. And it's kind of like as long as I could remember, I had piano lessons. So I was like, all right, just sick of it. So stopped. And within a couple of years of that, at like 15, picked up guitar because I was getting really into like classic rock and also like newer stuff like got like Avenged Sevenfold and My Chemical Romance and yeah, basically whoever was on Q101 and then whatever random classic rock my brother or dad turned me on to or whatever stuff I heard on K Dust playing Grand Theft Auto because hell they always had a great soundtrack on those games. But
Yeah.
I didn't really take guitar that seriously in high school. It was more just kind of like a hobby, something healthier to do at home other than just like TV or video games if I couldn't like
Mm,
link up with a friend or go outside to do something. And then when I got to college at IU Bloomington, it was when I really like got into it because there were suddenly so many people that I could jam with and play with. And it's
yeah.
also where my music tastes were getting like a lot more developed and branching out a lot more. And really, it was Jack White and White Stripes who musically were like my biggest inspiration to really dig in, because I'd been into guys like Hendrix as like some of my biggest inspirations, but I was still getting my chops to really get good enough to play something like Hendrix songs. Maybe I could play the chords, but not play them the way that Hendrix would, just kind of approximate it. But with Jack White's songs, some of the solos are really out there, but most of them are pretty attainable with some practice, and most of the main sections of the songs are pretty doable. So, got really into playing with that, and that kind of gave me like a template of things I could do if I was in a band or a jam situation. And started playing around with people and got really intensive about my practice, doing like 6 to 8 hours a day some days, and just really digging in and kind of being relentless about it. It was carrying a guitar with me everywhere I went, unplugged, and just always practicing kind of a vibe. And, it's like a couple years after that, I started my first band with some friends, and we called ourselves Oprah Winfrey's Nasty Habit, and we were an indie psychedelic punk band, and we mostly just meanderingly jammed, but had a couple songs, Queer John, and the other one I think was just called something Dragonfly, and it was just like an open 10 to 20 to 30 minute, just loose, completely unplanned jam with like a very like basic head, and then just wherever we took it as
That's
just an excuse to
outstanding.
not. Yeah, and we really should have like written more songs and taken it a bit further. We never really did. I tried to get us to do some covers, but we'd do like two run throughs in rehearsal, and half the band would be like, all right, I'm bored of doing this, can we do something else? I was like, I mean, yes, we can do something else, but if we don't practice the songs, we're not going to have these songs to play. But
Right.
I mean, hey, we're having fun. So if that's not what it's going to be as a serious band, whatever, let's just have fun and play. So that's what we did until then. We did break up and stop playing as much. And then kind of all of us kept playing. I wasn't in town for a while. I was out west working on a cannabis farm. But, I'd come back and hang with them sometimes and jam. But they ended up continuing the band under the name Second Street Sex Slaves, because the jam house was on Second Street, and they went to a band or a jam at the local pub that was all like, except for us, everyone over 50 or 60, and they told us you have to have a name to sign up. And our friend Chase walks up to the board, and what he writes on the board is Second Street Sex Slaves. So that became the band's new name,
There
basically.
you go.
And yeah,
And so it was decided. It was decided.
yeah, but those are some good times. Honestly, still see a few of those people on the regular, but a couple have kind of fallen off the face of the earth for all of us. So we know they're okay and alive, but that's about all we know.
Well, that's a blessing these days. What
Truth.
what decide so, we've also talked in a lot of other interviews this season about, band dynamics and dynamics on the road. It's something we've talked about in past seasons as well. And, one thing that, we try to bring to the attention of the casual attendee, the casual fan, is that there are a lot of people working really hard to make live music happen, but the people on stage are humans also, and they also have lives that can also be complicated, and they each face their own issues. And then there's getting along with everyone and going city to city, show after show. It's intense and it's a lot of work, and I'm curious to know if part of that group dynamic was an impetus for you to decide to branch out and go solo.
Well, it definitely was. I mean, with this group, it was, let's see, two, five of us total,
Mm,
and out of all of like the other four, three of them totally fine. We'd never had any conflict. It was pretty much always great. There is one other member who kind of made everything more difficult and just blew off practice and basically just used the excuse that he was a pot dealer to be like, well, I've got to take the schedule I've got of when people hit me up. I'm like, that's great, but you can block out like an hour or two a week and tell people at this time I can't
I
do this.
think, I
And
look, no shade on anybody allegedly selling pot. That's not, what I'm against. What I'm against is giving your commitment to something and then not following through. I would rather, somebody not offer me something than somebody offer me something and not follow through.
yeah,
Like
that's what it came down to. They didn't
I
have any
mean that
problem with what he was doing for income. It was, hey,
but
if you
that's
want to
that's
do
not
the band with us, you have to be here to be part of the band and practice.
well, listen,
And
when you're at a certain level, right, you get the luxury, it reminds me when I try to think of the quintessential example in music and I really think of Dennis Rodman. He was that dude that was like, I need to take a day to go to Vegas and party. I'll be back and ready for the game. And like he did, and he was, and he helped the team win 3 championships. He was essential to the team. But that's the thing, is that when it counted, when it mattered, he was there. But when, had he stayed in Vegas, who knows? You know what I mean? But that's the difference, between people is that like, yeah, he could go and do those things, but he was also dependable, and reliable to the point where like the championship mattered to him and the team mattered to him and he came back and he played the hell out of those games in those series. Um, but it's really, it's something I wanted to mention earlier while you were talking, but it's about knowing yourself and knowing your limits. And, some people do and some people don't, and it's no shade on anyone for it. It's just a matter of at some point, the people that are around you have to make a decision of whether or not they can continue to shoulder all of the responsibilities that come with whatever the project is, whether it's a band or an acting troupe or whatever the case may be. If it's affecting the group dynamic, then either a conversation needs to be had or dissolution needs to be had because otherwise you can't manage around that. You can't manage around general discontent.
no, again, like, glad you called it general discontent there at the end because it really does end up generalizing, even if it's in one person, it kind of spreads around. And,
Well,
with
it
multi mil,
metastasizes.
yeah,
It can start with one person, but you're a close group in close quarters. You're a close group in close quarters. What affects one inevitably will affect the other in one way or another, whether it's directly or indirectly through the person who it affects reaction. One way or another, the other shoe is going to drop, and the people who are in the bus with you are the only people there for it to drop on. And some people are able to keep that shoe held up, and other people need to let the shoe drop. And when you're with those kind of people, that's unsustainable.
yeah, well, professionalism and the lack of professionalism are both contagious in groups. I mean, I like to think, and this is like more so applied to my personal life, but it's true in anything. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And really, when you have any group, whether it's 3 people or 300 people, that's going to be the pattern you see. Because again, with some of the larger events that I work, it is the same people year after year. And, it's people who share their lives because they're from the same town or region, and some people only see each other for this event or maybe two other events. But because of that and the pressure of the event, but also the fact that it is people who you're sharing lives and communities with, there is friction, there is drama. But if the core of the community and how communication flows and how people interact and how conflicts or disputes are settled and even how victories are celebrated together, if that core is solid and the work ethic's solid, then you can have those rifts and moments of turbulence either on the individual level or the production level at different points, and you'll be fine, you'll be able to sail through. But it's kind of like a ship. If you have too many holes or you're not patching them properly, you're going to take in water and start to sink.
You know, it's so interesting you say that because one of the things I repeat so often on the show is that the rising tide lifts all ships, and one of the aims of the show is to lift up not just the guests we have on the show, but the spaces that they occupy. Because for every one, you know, you know, local band, for every one front of house engineer, there's, 1,000, 100 others in your local regional area, that are working just as hard as you are to get them that experience. And it's a shame that there are people that cast aspersions on others in the industry, but at the same time, it's important to platform those who are a wonderful example of the kind of the change from that sort of. I think that was a really nice roundabout way of answering the question of kind of how you went from group to solo, over there. I think that was a
Well,
pretty,
that was more specifically that one thing with that one person and not like some big grand statement. It was more, man, it's a lot of effort right
I
now to
mean,
coordinate our life with
it's
for the
that
people. I'm going to learn how to do stuff
that
solo production.
experience though, that experience is a microcosm of what sways one's mentality. And
Truth.
if you understand that, hey, I'm experiencing friction in this dynamic, and you can internalize that and become a one-man performer, that's a different level of understanding in my personal opinion. Uh,
Well, the irony of it is that being solo lasted about, I don't know, 6 to 9 months. It lasted about as long as it took me to learn how to do some production and DJing and to start doing it with people for shows. Because even if you're performing solo on a bill listed as a single act or person, it's still not really solo because then you're working with the other DJs on the bill. You're working, even if you're not running the event, you're working with the people on the event or tuning your act to it or at least getting the
mm,
info from them. So it never really, I guess not never, but it still isn't really solo. It's just where the collaborations are kind of
mm.
shift. So,
So
I
do you
was
find
touring more so as a solo artist and touring with a group more than when I was in a band.
so kind of like how Joe Marcinek does, where you kind of like, you assemble a crew around you of awesome people and you just throw out an awesome show.
Yeah, and you'll have people who are kind of regulars you bring in, or people you
Sure.
tune to like what the event is supposed to be aesthetically, or even
Well,
just people's availability.
that gets back to, knowing the right people to call at the right time. So, what is Glitch Gatsby?
So Glitch Gatsby is the name of it's my DJ moniker, and also for production and performing, and going to be expanding it into a band soon. But main genre that I started in when I started in DJing was electro swing and glitch hop. So I kind of wanted to represent both of those. Gatsby for the swing and the jazz, and
Mm,
glitch for the electronic and the glitch hop side, and
got
kind of
you.
represent both of those. And the Great Gatsby movie had just come out. It was 2013, 2014 when I started
Mhm.
DJing. Actually, Is it 20? Yeah, 2013 when I started DJing, 2014 when I really got going with it. And that movie had just come out, I think, in the past year or so. And I discovered through a friend who was a DJ who I was helping with his shows. And that event was another one in Northwest Indiana in Valparaiso at Franklin House. And the group was called the Magic Liquor Train Experience. And it was Ryan Timmons and Jonah Page. And Jonah Page did more traditional house and techno. He was the guy who'd been DJing for a long time before it was cool, and uh, had like an attic filled with records. And then Ryan Timmons was more, he just learned how to DJ. He's more into newer electronic and festival EDM, but not really top 40. He was more into like big gigantic and then obscure glitch hop that he would dig for.
Like Glitch
And
Mob?
not so much glitch mob, more
Yeah.
Eugene the cat. And
Okay. Okay. Right
yeah,
on. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. All right. I
So
feel you.
some more like deeper cuts that are
Like the
like jazzy glitchy.
like the first Girl Talk album.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
say yeah, definitely chopped it up a lot and had a lot of different stuff
Yeah.
where it'd be like
Real. Real.
Jay-Z against some like glitch hop background. And
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. Fuck
So
yeah.
then between the two of them, they had a really good blend. And that was where I first really got involved with doing electronic music, not even performing, but helping them and trying to jam and make that work. But neither of them had really done much with music, like with musicians. So it didn't work as well on either end on that, but did work with helping them promote it and do some of their first shows. And yeah, it was right after getting with them, and then I ended up leaving Northwest Indiana again, going back to IU to pick back up with school after a break I'd taken, and that was when I started Glitch Gatsby, and from the inspiration of Ryan Timmons and his selection of songs with Eugene the Cat and whatnot, that's what turned me on to that kind of music, and even knowing it existed, because I liked some electronic, but I hadn't really fallen in love with it until I discovered the electronic that was still blending in like blues or funk or soul. So like Pretty Lights,
Yep.
Manic Focus, Grizz, Floozies, Eugene the Cat, and
Shout out
yeah.
Manic Focus. Shout out J Mac. Shout out Jake Barinholtz. Good buddies. Love you guys.
Oh man, they do some fantastic stuff, all of them.
J Mac's a wizard. Jake is a master of the drums. They are phenomenal. Yep. 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 Love the homies.
Yeah, so that kind of opened up a whole new world for me of, oh my god, so the be electronic music and exploring all these different areas, but still have all these different genres that I've already fallen in love with, and either original music for it or sample based. And then I took that and started exploring that, starting to learn how to use Ableton and Logic and start to do some production. And really only feel like just now after 10 years that I've really gotten that properly under thumb, but that's a whole other story. But when I was back in Bloomington, ended up getting with a friend, and he was helping somebody with a group called Bloomington Electronic, founded by Mark Kunoff and Spencer Hutchison. Recently uh, passed on, sadly. May rest in peace. But they started Bloomington Electronic, and it was meant to be a platform for local electronic music and digital and visual artists and other people to get together and do events and express themselves. And it had taken some different formats over the years with different like house events or small venue or coffee shop shows. And when we took over, we did that too and started with like an open electronic music jam in the back of this bar, Crazy Horse, or doing a small backyard show right around the beginning of the year around homecoming weekend. And, just kind of experimenting with different things, but we were able to kind of keep it as an open platform for students and other like young people in the area to come out and get on a lineup and have it not be too restrictive as the genre, because we really tried to make it where we were either putting on like quality tight shows or making money or doing a showcase proper or all of that. But either way, trying to make it so that even if somebody's genre of music wasn't necessarily what would normally get booked on a lineup at a bar or a venue, giving them a chance to play a bar or a venue and have that stage experience, and kind of taking seriously that, yeah, we all wanted to do where it's like growing things and making money for the group, but keeping the priority accessibility to different artists. And it was really great to be able to do that, and ended up doing that with Dylan Fish as my vice president in it. And he's actually now in Chicago doing a lot of stuff with 69 Club at The Point and Mid Lane Esports, and Slow Burn Productions is his other company where he's working with Taylor Aesthetics, Bobby Taylor, a.k.a. Scarlet Widow, and they're doing stuff together, Fish and Chips. So yeah, it's cool that get to see people I've worked with back then doing stuff now in Chicago, but kind of feels like coming full circle for all of us. But Glitch
But a lot
Gatsby started through that whole year, and after that year, ended up working with the Electro Swing people out of Chicago and starting to work with them, doing the blog and music journalism, then touring with them, and kind of soaking up a lot more of that neo vintage scene and the music, and working with burlesque performers and circus performers and a lot more different kinds of shows, and really getting some wild experiences under my belt with that.
Well, I was gonna say it's pretty interesting that you mention all of that because your residencies have seemed to be mostly Michigan based. And you've talked a lot about your experience in Indiana and the greater, Chicagoland area. And I'm curious to hear how you got to have residencies, for example, in Detroit, Ybor City, among others and involved in the Michigan scene.
Well, Ybor is actually Tampa, so that one's way down south. But
I'm not good. I'm an English teacher. I'm not a geography teacher. I
I
don't know
mean, hey,
I don't know geographicals.
I didn't know Ybor City even was a place until starting and doing the tour there. But
I
yeah,
know
both of those.
Ypsilanti is a place. It starts with a Y and it's in Michigan, so I figured it was close. I don't know why. Why? No pun
Well, I mean,
intended.
well, part of it comes from the fact that the electro swing scene itself is pretty small and niche. It's widespread but close knit. And the same goes for a lot of other of those different art scenes that I mentioned, burlesque and circus and even horror production, because Theater Bizarre, which is on there, is really at heart a Halloween event held usually in the 2 weeks preceding Halloween. And the people who do it and put it on are horror industry special effects artists and makeup artists or
Oh wow.
performers or actors. And there's a lot of just top tier talent involved with that. And same with a lot of people who are involved with the Ybor City event, Steampunk Ball. And it's really a lot of those people are kind of connected between both areas, or at least know each other. And really, it was my tour manager, Joseph Vortek, who knew all these people and had these tours kind of lined up alongside Mr. Automatic, Bill Holland, who's one of my other creative mentors over the years. And they were kind of a working duo with the group Calliope Presents. And Bill Holland, because he had a full time job, I think he was with the American Dental Association at the time as their videographer and art editor, but he couldn't go on the road and tour. So that's how I got on there to replace him, doing video projection art and opening up as a DJ to support Vortec. And he had all the tours set up where we would go with our main stop being Tampa, and then have a lot of smaller stops on the way where Tampa would be like, the big ticket gig that
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
paid
exactly.
the
Right. The
bill.
show and then you line up
Yeah,
the other, yes, the supplementals. Sure, absolutely.
yeah, pay our gas and float a hotel, that kind of a
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or
Three bar shows a
crash at
week. Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
100%.
exactly.
Yep. No, I'm
And
well aware. Say
but
less.
had a lot of fun doing that. And then the Theater Bizarre, that one's more of a marathon because you're doing it for either the one weekend, which you kind of show up early and usually stay late, or you're flying in, which is almost more tiring to go for less time because then you're dropping into it in the middle of
As
everything at
it's
full
going. Yep.
pandemonium. Yep.
Yep.
And you know, some people there who are performing have already been on site there. It's held at the Masonic Temple in downtown Detroit, and it's not held in the auditorium space many people might be familiar with. It's held in the actual historic part of the building where they convert 8 floors of it to a giant 8 floor music festival meets haunted house meets sideshow meets circus, and it's just absolutely wild. Yeah. And it's actually billed as the largest masquerade party on earth, which is true.
Right. Fair enough.
And
Wow. Fair play.
the New York Times called us Ringling Brothers meets Dawn of the Dead, which I have to say is pretty
Ringling
accurate.
Brothers and Barnum and Deadly.
Yep, Barnum, yes, that is golden. But
Thank
yeah,
you.
it's that one's a marathon, kind of like a music festival, very much so. But yeah, some of the people who were there had been there for a month or two building the place because they can't alter it as a historic building.
Right. It's a
So since
historic
a
monument.
historic,
Yep.
yeah, they have to put scaffolding out
Yep. Yep.
that covers it and build onto that. And yeah, monumental effort, even though they do it each year.
No
Like,
pun intended.
yeah, right. But it's it's basically a quarter of the year on setup, execution, and teardown. And this year they didn't have it, or last year due to some booking issues and reorganization stuff. But uh, little birdie did tell me that it is all but confirmed for this next year. So if you're
Pay
interested,
attention,
keep an
folks.
eye out.
Keep it on your calendar. Keep your eyes out. We're gonna have updates coming from Secondhand Talent if when this is allegedly confirmed. So, talk a little bit about some of your work at Electric Forest.
Yeah, gladly. So at Electric Forest, I was part of the hangar stage, which now is been reformatted to be called the Dream Emporium. So new concept, same creative teams. But the hangar stage was kind of a psychedelic neo vintage throwback where it was like an airplane hangar, and you go in, and at first when you go in there are these girls dressed as GIs, and they have candy trays that they're giving out, and they're all decked out all psychedelic like colored hair and glitter, and then the candy's all super colorful. And then on the sides of the hangar you have different shops and little entertainment district areas. And it's sort of like a movie set where it's a
Mm.
facade of a storefront of like wood and it's painted up. And then behind it, you just have a tent. But when you're walking in from the front and you aren't seeing that side, all you're seeing is what looks again like movie set style. Like you're actually in this old timey barber shop or GI barrack where they're doing temporary tattoo parlors, or another one, the matchmaker service, or the ice cream parlor they had, or, and this is my favorite, if you did a scavenger hunt or found some secret clues or hidden doorways, you could go and make your way into a hidden speakeasy. So we had a stage that had our lineup artists who are on the main lineup that you see when you look at the main poster and promo for a festival. But then we also had our secret stage, which again was the hidden speakeasy called the Captain's Club, and then later I can't remember the name, but it was like a French cabaret. And, you know, we'd have burlesque and variety act and mind readers or bands or DJs and different routines and acts and a special bar with gourmet cocktails and really just dialing up that whole, again, neo vintage, but also psychedelic throwback kind of aesthetic and energy.
So,
And sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so was curating these kind of experiences what led you to create your own entertainment company? Or did that, like, which came first? Did you start working with these festivals before or after On a Stage came about?
Well, On a Stage was a concept and name that I created shortly after leaving Bloomington Electronic and just never really put the hit the accelerator on it because all these other opportunities came up and I was so inexperienced still and I'd done some successful shows, but still knew I had so much more to learn. So instead of plowing ahead, I kind of put that on the shelf and spent the next 5 to 8 years working with Vortec and Novahan Productions, who is the main group that oversees the Hanger stage. Vortex company, Calliope Presents, that he had with Bill Holland and Pete Augusta. They oversaw talent direction and talent scouting for both the character actors, or not oversaw on the character actors, but helped on that. But they did oversee primarily the talent direction and recruiting for the burlesque performers and variety act who would be on the speakeasy stage and help kind of take that whole thing as much as possible off Novahan's plate. But I'd say that really working with all of them is what taught me the things that I needed to know to do that on a professional level instead of just winging it the way I had been. And you never stop figuring some things out as you go, but it helps when you have a few different playbooks to already go off of.
Yeah, having that launching pad, not just of experience, but like, you get your footing, in this, variety background, and what you gain from that is a variety of insights into different aspects of the industry. And it's really exemplified in the work you've put together at Harvest Fest, at Electric Forest, as Glitch Gatsby, I think overall.
Well, it's definitely something that I think makes a different experience when you're doing the hanger stage side of things, not just because of the different kinds of people coming in, but that side of the music industry or music festival scene is really more theater than music in terms of who are the actual people doing it and putting it on and what their backgrounds and experiences are or experiences. And you'll have musicians, DJs, bands, all that. But yeah, immersive theater, I'd say, is much more so the focus of Hanger Stage, which really sets it apart from other stages that will have different aesthetics, art, concepts behind it, different things going on stage instead of just music and bands, like different dancers or kinetic performers. But the immersive theater really is something that was kind of special to our stage there, and not uniquely just that instance at that one festival. Before that festival, it definitely stands apart. And you have the psychedelic chapel, but that's actually also under Novahan and same group, and was another part of Forest I had the good fortune to work on because I got to work different parts of it each year, starting on media, then production assistant, then running sound, and then performing. And, I guess kind of getting experience all around and getting to work with all those different people, but, also sharing that immersive theater focus all together each year, regardless of which role I was in.
I mean, it really sounds like, yeah, you definitely covered all the bases and then some. I guess my final question for you is, would you say that this, immersive theatrical sense is something that you bring into your Glitch Gatsby performances?
I'd say it's something that I bring in certain small areas. It's kind of hard to do without scaling it up to a much larger degree with what I do, but that is kind of the plan longer term. I'd say right now, because not every group you're going to work with and not every festival calls for it, but I definitely say I guess, yeah, what you're talking about, the diversity and variety of the kind of groups I've worked with. That's something I bring into everything I do, whether it's the songs I select for my sets, not just being one genre, but kind of pulling from everywhere, or the kind of ideas that I want to work with on a festival or a project like Harvest Fest Eagles Nest Stage. Like, again, like I said, it was me title lead, but it was a giant group effort with not just
Mm.
my two immediate co producers, but everyone who worked on that. Like I mentioned Judy, who is Steve's partner, fiance now, I guess. And congratulations to both of them, actually. But she, if you look at the photos from Harvest Fest and our stage, and you see the crazy psychedelic canopy that's going across all the different parts, that was her doing that just 2 days, just going up and down two 20-foot ladders again and again, stringing that yarn to make that. And it was really bringing in the people who I knew would have the ideas I wouldn't, to cover those bases. Because again, I've worked to try to cover as many different roles as I've been able to, but even doing that for 10 years, you're never going to be able to do everything. And the best you can do is get enough experience in each area. But you're never going to be able to specialize in everything. And even if you're specialized in something, other people are always going to have different ideas, better ideas, and really just changing it up. And also just making it so that you're not overloading yourself trying to do more than any one person ever should.
I think that's a perfect message to sum it up on. The most we can do is the most we can do, and when we're there are things we can't do, to know which people we can rely on to do those jobs. Sam Baker, Glitch Gatsby, it was such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me, Vermy.
This is Steiner with another episode of Secondhand Talent, and we will see you next Wednesday. That's the podcast. That's it.
Later.
Yeah. All
Well,
right.
yeah,
Cool.
awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you
there
for
we go.
having
Right
me.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.